When you're getting close to ending a project, sometimes it feels like all you want to do is get it all wrapped up. Sometimes, though, you have to take a few things off that you've just put on in order to make sure the final product meets your expectations. Hi, I'm Nico Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. It's a little bit of one step forward, two steps back sometimes. Today, I'm talking about that as it applies to painting your boat. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Marine Electronics Advisor, a service from SeaTech Systems. Get unlimited expert advice as you upgrade and maintain your boat's electronic and communication systems. Got questions about how to install your new AIS? Want to know if that on-sale radar will talk to your chart plotter? Want to know how to configure your new Wi-Fi extender? Are you embarking on a full electronics refit? The Marine Electronics Advisor has you covered. Use code BOATGALLEY for an exclusive $100 off your first month subscription. Visit ctech.systems/DIY to learn more. The link is in the show notes. Marine Electronics Advisor, the ultimate subscription consulting service for the DIY boat owner. At some point, we'll get to our electronics, and particularly that radar talking to the chart plotter question. But first, we are getting so close to having the final coats of paint on Calypso's hull and bulwarks. It's been a months-long process, which you may have been aware of if you've been following the podcast or reading along on the blog. When painting is all about the prep, sometimes you're not even aware of the prep you need to do until after you've already applied some. Yeah, we learned this a little bit of the hard way. And one of the things that makes prepping a boat for painting so much more difficult than prepping a house is that there are all kinds of things that might be on the hull. You may have old sealants, and particularly if you've used a silicone sealant anywhere, you have to make sure that you get every last trace of that off before you put any paint on, because paint won't stick to the silicone. Sometimes, as we recently found out, you might even be dealing with wax that was used when they released the boat from the mold. And that makes the paint not stick to whatever that wax is. And so what happens is you see the background sort of keep printing through, and it makes this little island around where there is no paint. That could be super, super frustrating when you haven't seen it as you've gone through the whole prep process. And we had this happen very recently. We had done our months of sanding. We had done our coats of primer. We did 3 coats of primer on the hull and the bulwarks, and we applied the first coat of paint. We came back in the morning to check on our work, all excited to see what that hull looked like. And as we were looking along the hull, you could see voids in 3 or 4 places. And we were wondering what the heck that was. And we realized that probably what it was, because yes, we sanded and we cleaned and we prepped and we wiped and we did everything you're supposed to do when you're getting ready to paint a hull. But there were still these voids. And so before we put on the next coat of paint, Jeremy actually took all that freshly applied paint, not on the whole hull, just in the sections where the voids were, but he took it all back down and did some more intense cleaning and solvent wiping and what have you, and we put more paint on. And we've been watching it, and so far it hasn't reoccurred, it hasn't reappeared, these voids. So if our mantra on boat projects is anything you put on, you're going to have to take back off again. So keep that in mind as you're putting anything on the boat. I don't care if you're talking about paint or if you're talking about bedding something or you're talking about sealing something. Just know that eventually it's going to have to come off again. So try to be aware of how you have left access. But also, before you put anything new on, you're going to have to take all the old stuff off. And that includes paint and rebedding things and any of that. Boat projects can feel never-ending. As you are going through them, there are all kinds of details just to be aware of. If you take, for example, your portholes off to rebed them because you're worried about leakage, you will have to get every last bit of that sealant off of both the hull and the porthole before you can then apply new sealant to put it back on the hull. Similarly, before you put on any new paint, you have to make sure that the old stuff is well knocked off so the new stuff will adhere. It feels like a lot. It feels like a lot of detail. It feels like a lot of repetition and doing the same thing over and over again. But I will say we would much rather sand down that little section of fresh paint and do our best to make sure those voids don't come back rather than just ignore it, keep going, and then have our paint job go sideways more quickly because those voids allow spaces for the paint to break down. Taking newly applied paint off, taking old sealant off, being aware of the angle of the screws that you're putting in as you are redoing stuff on your boat, it feels endless. It feels nitpicky. But down the line, as you're looking at the boat or you need to maintain it, you will thank your past self for being that diligent, even though in the moment, boy, it would sure be nice just to slap another coat of paint on and go about your merry business. I can't wait to share an anchorage with you because it will mean that we're both out cruising. And yeah, sure, still working on the boats, but at least we're out at anchor somewhere beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love hearing from our listeners. We love it when you share us with your friends, and we love it when you don't forget to subscribe. There are 2 of these that come out every single week. Have the most fantastic one.